This is a review tutorial for recoding, specifically to recode in order to create a scale score. My name is Adams and McGuire. Let's start with an example of a measure that does not need to have any items recoded. This is the Beck's Depression Inventory, or BDI, that is used as a measure of clinical depression and is often used as a screening tool if you were to go and see a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist. Now, depression, as you might imagine, is a multifaceted construct. Simply asking somebody if they're depressed would be likely insufficient to determine clinical depression. Therefore, the Beck's Depression Inventory and other inventories of depression include multiple items, and ultimately all the items are added up and computed to determine one's level of depression. Now notice these first few items of the Beck's Depression Inventory. Notice that for all of these, a 0 indicates no symptomatology of depression, a 1 is minor, a 2 is more severe, and a 3 is very severe. And all of the items are coded in this way, with a 0 or a low score indicating no depressive symptomatology, and a 3 indicating very high or severe depressive symptomatology. Don't worry about reading all the items. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how a higher score means greater depression on the Beck Depression Inventory. And so at the end, you would add up all your points, and this is how you would interpret your level of depression. So again, a low score indicates pretty normal mood, no worry about clinical depression. And as you get higher scores, you get more severe levels of depression. Let's take a look at another scale in which there are multiple items designed to measure a single construct. Read through the items and see if you can take a guess at what construct is being measured with these items. If you guessed self-esteem, you are correct. Now let's imagine that we passed out that questionnaire measuring people's self-esteem, and we entered the data into SPSS. So this is the SPSS data file. You notice that I just entered the questions as question 1 through question 10. And here are all the participants' responses. Before we do anything else to create a scale score, we need to recode the appropriate items. To recode, you should go back to the original items, and first you need to decide what a higher score should indicate. We could make this so that a high score indicates a high level of self-esteem, or we could decide that a high score actually means low self-esteem. Now, with some measures, that's already indicated, and you should do what the original creators or researchers determined. However, if you have the choice, my general advice is to make it that a high score indicates a high level of whatever construct it is that you're measuring. In this example, I would decide that a high score indicates a high level of self-esteem, and I would recode any items that do not indicate this. See if you can identify which items need to be recoded. I'll give you a hint. There are 5 items that need to be recoded. All right, the answer is that numbers 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10 all need to be recoded so that a higher score will indicate higher levels of self-esteem. Now we can recode in SPSS. If you were following along in the IBM SPSS workbook by Adams and Lawrence, go to page 40 and 41. So we go to transform, recode into different variables, and then I'm going to select all the variables that I want to recode. So that's question 3, question 5, and questions 8 through 10. and I'm going to give each one a new variable name. And I just add an R to the end of each of my variables to remind myself that this has been recoded. You can call your variables anything that you want, as long as it does not begin with a number, there are no special characters, and there's no spaces. And your professor didn't tell you to use specific names, of course. Okay, then we click on old and new values. For this, I need to remember how my original data was coded. So I could click on variable view and check, or I could look back at my raw data and see that I've got a scale from 0 to 3. So that's going to determine how I recode. So I'm going to take my lowest score, my old value of 0, and make it my highest score, which is 3. And then a 1 is going to become a 2. A 2 is going to become a 1, and a 3 is going to be a 0. So I've got my old values of 0, 1, 2, 3, and my new values of 3, 2, 1, 0. Click OK, and then all your new variables will show up at the end of your data set. Now, if you're worried about recoding, you can do a quick check to make sure that you did it correctly. The first check is to make sure that you don't have any missing values here that don't exist in your original data set. The other is you could look at some of your items, and so here we've got the original question 3 is 0. Our recoded should be 3. And then for question 5, we have a 1, so that should be a 2. Want to just double check to make sure that you did it correctly. Let's end with a review. Tell me which item or items should be recoded in the following measures. Here we have a depression measure. I want a higher score to indicate higher depression, and this measure is rated on a scale from 0 to 4, where 0 equals never. If you need more time, press pause now. The answer is question 3. Question 3, as it stands, a higher score would indicate less depression, and so this item needs to be recoded. As a bonus, see if you can figure out how we would recode in SPSS. In other words, a 0 would be recoded as what, a 1 as blank, etc. The answer is a 0 would be recoded as a 4, a 1 would be recoded as a 3, a 2 would be recoded as a 2, and you do need to tell SPSS this. You cannot just assume that SPSS knows. So you do need to write an SPSS to recode into 2. And then a 3 would be recoded as a 1, and a 4 would be recoded as a 0. Let's try another. Here we have a life satisfaction measure. I want a higher score to indicate greater satisfaction with life. Which item or items need to be recoded? Press pause if you need more time. The answer is questions 1 and 4. Both of these, as they are worded, would indicate a higher score indicating less satisfaction. So these need to be recoded in the reverse. Let's try one more. This is a measure of environmentally responsible behavior. I want a higher score to indicate more responsible behaviors. Press pause if you need more time. The answer is question 2. Question 2, a high score would indicate less environmentally responsible behavior, and therefore needs to be recoded in SPSS. I hope you found this review to be helpful. The next step is to check the reliability of the scales. Go on to video 5 when you're ready.